Welcome, everyone, to episode 12 of the Starcraft 2 Weekly Line Live. I'm your host, Ace, and today we're going to be joined by my good friends Miro and Relinquish. I set this up because I always enjoyed open and honest conversations about balance, and I feel like this can be a little bit hard to find in the community. Hope to do my small part to change that with this show. If you enjoy, please consider giving a like or subscribe. This week, PTR patch went live, along with the new map pool. We got a ton to talk about, so let's get into it. And I think the first question is the one on everybody's mind here. Is Zerg OP? How do we feel about the larva change and about Zerg overall? Now, I don't know. I think maybe let's let Miro start because he's joined by two Zergs here.
I think it's actually too early to say. Is my big thing. I do feel like it's too early to say. I will say Zerg definitely feels stronger in the early game. They feel more robust, I think is the best way to put it.
Sure.
They're able to absorb blows a little bit better and recover from them a little bit better. And it feels like it can be very easy for them to grow out of hand if you're not constantly on top of them. But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I'm hesitant to say it's overpowered because I'm not sure it is. I have had games so far on the new patch. I've probably played, I don't know, I played like 65 games on the PTR and another probably 25 games on the new patch now. So I've played a decent amount. And I think with the new change, I've found it's definitely harder to get damage done early, but it's so hard to say whether that's a result of the lava change specifically or just the fact that everything ramps up so much slower and nothing flows together properly. Your early game is Terran because like you gotta skip workers to get a Reaper out if you want to get it out earlier. But the cost of having that worker of missing that worker isn't just that you've skipped the worker, it's also because you're sinking more into gas. You've taken like a third of your economy goes into gas now really early on, and so like this has compounding effects. So it's really hard to say whether the result of the lava change is Zerg overpowered. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I just think it's a case of everything with the 8 worker start has made it really hard to say anything is overpowered or underpowered.
Yeah. I think the math is just so fuzzy right now. It's honestly a little bit hard to say. That's kind of my impression as well. I will say, I don't know, Zerg feels nice. I'll say that. Here, I'll let Relin give his thoughts first before I dive into it.
So if it comes to the larva change itself, purely on speculation, I don't know the whole math behind it, because I'm assuming the larva doesn't actually spawn increase when you have an inject that drops and stuff. So there's a lot of what ifs and variables here, but purely on speculation, because Zerg is a natural race that tends to grow exponentially. So example, in the beginning of the game, they can't take that much losses. They can't really split between drones and workers, but in the late game, they can make 50 workers at a time if they really feel like it, that exponential mark. I'm assuming if you increase their larva production purely speculatively, that it would cause them to be what you would call a little too strong or a little overtuned, you could say. I wouldn't say busted, but something that would probably not be necessary. But that's purely speculative. I don't know the math behind it. But generally speaking, if I were to, say if I like the change or not, I would probably say not. No, I would probably prefer to look back.
Yeah, I can feel that.
Here's the thing, right? The big thing that I've noticed is there's two major offsets to this change, right? I think it would be unequivocal to say, I think it would. I think you could easily say Zerg was overpowered if it had been the PTR patch, because lava spawned faster at 9 seconds, not 9.5, and you had the queen cost reduction, and hatcheries were 275 on top of that, so everything was cheaper as well.
Yeah.
But now
I
on the
remember that.
live version, it's slightly slower from the PTR at 9.5. Queens are still 175 and hatcheries are 300, so the rate of expansion is a little bit more curtailed as a direct result of that. And
Yeah.
I think that makes a really big difference in the early game because, like I said before, the rate of your income, your mineral income in particular, is hampered quite a lot by the fact that you start with 8 workers.
Yeah. I was trying to, I remember I was kind of talking to you about this the other day, and it was kind of hard to explain because it's like the increased production capacity, like, definitely smooths out Zerg in the early game a lot and makes it a lot easier, it feels like, to expand versus before we had the larva change. But because they increase the costs as well, it's also more expensive. So it's kind of weird. It feels like it kind of makes us like, all three races are kind of clawing for expansions a little bit more now because your tech is still available. It's available a little bit earlier now, worker wise, right? But it costs more to expand at the same time, so it's like it's sort of incentivized to be aggressive a little bit because of that. Because it's like your aggressive options still cost the same as they did before, and they're available earlier, but your expansions are now more expensive, right? So that just encourages more aggression than what we had before, right? So I kind of feel that a lot.
Yes and no. I both agree and disagree with that because the big thing about that is where it comes in is the changes to the mineral counts, right? Is once you reach a certain point, it just doesn't feel like you need to go past 3 bases.
Sure.
Zerg is a bit different with that because obviously Zerg scales exponentially with bases. But there's a point where it's like
scale exponentially, but Zerg
yes,
has
but slightly
a
differently.
More rapid. Yeah, because we have burst production that we can dedicate specifically to economy. So, we're able to explode our economy really fast.
Yeah, and I find that for Protoss and Terran, there's a point where you hit 3 bases and you can just kind of hurdle on 3 bases for a really long time.
Yeah.
Like a disturbingly long time, and I don't like that. I've made that vocal point in the past.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the mineral changes in particular. I have a question about that, but yeah, that's definitely been something I've been noticing. Feels like we can just stay on 2 or 3 bases forever, and it doesn't. I mean, it's like I like it and I hate it at the same time because it's fun to do, but it's like a guilty pleasure. It makes me a worse player. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I don't like that.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree.
All right, I gotta share my thoughts on this this larva change though, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about the math here. Or I guess first I'll just say my perspective on this. So back when it was on PTR and the larva buff was even stronger, and we also had reduced cost hatcheries and queens, it felt really strong. Zerg felt pretty fucking strong. If we were on that version of the game, I would say, pretty reliably, I think Zerg is overpowered, right? But on what we have right now, it's Zerg is definitely stronger. I wouldn't argue with that. But I think that saying that Zerg is overpowered might be a little bit too far right now. But the other thing that's interesting about that from my perspective is I was a big hater of this patch until the larva change, and then I was like, I'm kind of enjoying playing on this patch now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, here's the thing, right?
Yeah,
it almost
Zerg getting something helps.
I think that's part of it, but what I was going to say is there's two things that I've noticed from Zerg is generally very gas light in the early game. So,
Yep.
because they get enough gas for layer and enough gas for speed. That's usually it. And the layer can be delayed for a fair amount of time depending on various factors in the early game. So you often don't even need to go into all that much, several minutes. The other races require a lot more gas for tech, and so their income mineral wise is greatly hampered on the new patch. And Zerg's build orders have always been a lot more flowy than the other two. Protoss to some extent have always kind of had an element of, well, I don't need to commit to this aggression quite as much as, say, Terran. Terran's aggression has always been like super committed. If you are going to hit this timing, you have to hit this timing within a very specific window, and if you don't hit this timing, you're fucked. If this is the timing that you're going for, But I do feel like with the new patch, there's two things that I feel like is the case, is because of the more flowy nature of Zerg and the more mineral heavy nature and gas light nature, their builds are significantly less impacted. And I also feel like with the lava changes specifically, it kind of feels like Zerg has stayed a little bit closer to the 12 worker start than the other two races have. Now, the exception to that, I think, is Protoss gets, what we mathed it out the other day. Relin is like something like basically 2.5 chrono boosts before you can get the first mule off, something like that.
It's between 2.5 and 2 2.33 or something, somewhere in there.
Yeah, before you get the first mule or the first inject, which does a lot to offset that, I think. But I do still think that the more gas-heavy nature of Protoss does severely impact their early game build orders.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that you're talking about here. There is one thing that I did want to go into, like a little bit of the math. So Relin has this chart that he made, which I thought was kind of cool. Just looking at different supply and workers that you start with in Legacy of the Void versus HOTS and this current patch. But then the thing that I found really interesting was when we were looking at the larva production rate and kind of doing the math on like how long until you get an extra larva, right? Because I know that this isn't accurate to think about, because really, so the real benefit of this is that your larva comes a little bit earlier, right? And it's compounding, right? Like, because it's a queue system, right? Where if the hatchery has 3 larvae, it's not producing natural larvae, right? But if you're spending those larvae, then it's going to be producing 1. And it'll produce at a rate of 1 every 9.5 seconds, right? So what you're actually getting from this is your larvae are producing workers earlier, which means that you're getting a couple more seconds of earlier mining time on those workers, right? And workers mine at like roughly a mineral per second, right? So that's kind of the practical benefit that you're getting from this. But it's a little bit hard to quantify it in that sense, because then you're dealing with like the exponential math of that. And the way that people think of this is thinking of it as like Zerg getting extra larvae, which is not really what it is, but we can do the math to see what it actually looks like. So if we're looking at a difference of 10.7 to 9.5 seconds, that's 1.2 seconds less per larva production, right? And if it's taking, let's see, how did we do this before? So if it's taking a larva 9.5 seconds to produce, then we're getting what? What did we do before? It was like...
It's 10.7 before to 9.5.
Yeah. Hang on. So... Right. So in order to get the extra larva, you would have to produce 8 cycles, essentially. It's 7.916 repeating, because you're looking at the time to produce a larva and then dividing the extra time that you're getting into that, right? So you're looking at every 8 cycles roughly, a little bit less than that, you get an extra larva. And this isn't how it actually works, because the timing is earlier throughout the entire cycle, right? But we're just thinking of it this way for now. So if we're looking at it like this, then 7.916 times 9.5, because that's the time it takes for a larva cycle. That's about 75 seconds, right? So it's a minute and 15 seconds. So if you want to think of this practically as like how much extra larva is Zerg getting, you could roughly think of it as every 76 seconds, for every hatchery that Zerg has, they get 1 extra larva than what they would have previously. That's not how it actually works, because like if this is how it actually works, then it would be like at the end of 76 seconds, an extra larva pops. But that's not what happens, right? Like instead, all of the larvae produced within that 76 seconds are produced a little bit earlier, right? And then you squeeze an extra one in there because now you have room for it because it takes less time, right? That's what's actually happening here. But I don't know. I just thought it would be interesting to think about it that way, because for a lot of people it can be a little hard to quantify like how much extra larva is Zerg getting. So I think of it as roughly 1 extra larva every 76 seconds per hatchery. I don't know if you guys find that interesting or useful at all.
I think it's interesting to note because 76 seconds, like the number 76 sounds like a decently sized number, but in the context of StarCraft, 76 seconds really isn't that long. And like, yes, it's a significant chunk of time, especially if a game is, 5 minutes long. 5 minutes is what, 300 seconds, I think, off the top of my head.
Yeah.
You're getting three extra larvae per hatchery in that amount of time, which really isn't that much. But as the game goes longer, you do find yourself getting the additional larva does start to add up, especially as the base count starts to rise. And I find it interesting because there's always a point where it almost becomes more beneficial to throw down more hatcheries rather than have more queens, and then just have the larva automatically spawn as you're using it. And that's always been the case, but it's almost more effective to do that now than it used to be in the 12 worker start.
Interesting. I'm also just thinking about... sorry, it sounded like you wanted to jump in, Relin.
Well, I was thinking you'd have to do some math on that. So, like, the inject puts 3 larvae on there, which effectively doubles the larva count, but then under the just making an extra hatchery, that's 300 minerals versus the 175 of the queen, and then it doesn't double it, but it increases it by roughly like 12.5%, or like the larva production. So it's always going to be more efficient to always inject and get more queens, but like I think it's not necessarily the fact that I think it would be much different if we just got a single larva at the end of the 8 larva cycle. Like that would be, but it's the compounding effect over time. It's getting that every single time you were to make that worker, it's coming out 1 second faster, which is a major deal in the beginning of the game.
Yeah, because economies are exponential in StarCraft.
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing I think is interesting is like just doing rough math again, but like if you're looking at like a 12-minute game, for example, the 12 times 60 for 60 seconds, right? So 720 seconds. And then let's say the Zerg is on, I don't know, let's say, because you have to average over the whole course of the game. So let's say they're on an average of 3 bases, because they probably ended on 5. right? But an average of 3 bases or whatever, so we get like 2,160. Then we divide by our 75 cycle or whatever, and that's about 29 extra larvae. So it's like 30 extra larvae in like a 12-minute game, roughly.
Yeah.
Very roughly, but just like to quantify it. And like that is definitely significant, but it's also not crazy. But then the fact that, like you said, it's not just at the end of the cycle, it's like everything is squeezed a little bit tighter and produces a little faster, and that allows you to ramp up and snowball a little easier. So it's actually really hard to quantify like how big of an impact this is.
Yeah, you'd have to run some really complicated like statistics and math here, because when you said over the course of the game you get a 30 extra larvae, but that also doesn't count in the queen's first, like their injects first pop off the hatch. So like there may be like a couple there's a couple second lags everywhere, and like those are not compounding, and like like I said, this is very complicated, but I would say overall it probably does benefit Zerg. Probably, I could only imagine like 12% or something, and they're like,
that's about right.
Like,
that's about
I've
right.
seen
maybe like a little bit less, but I mean,
I think it's
like
less
overall...
because I've seen that math before, and if I remember right, the difference is more like 5 to 7%.
Well,
but I would have to look at the math again. I saw somebody else do the math, and I thought it was it looked accurate to me.
So I mean, I'm strictly speaking before the queens pop. So like strictly before the queens pop, your larva cycles are coming out like roughly 12% faster. But like when you add in that queen, they are essentially the same as if under the 12 workers start for like a majority of the time, because you should theoretically always have larva popping off that hatchery as often as possible. If you're not injecting, like it benefits players that don't inject, but most pro players will be injecting, or at least anyone above diamonds in most scenarios. So I don't think it would have that big of an impact. You could say the overall impact is because it's in the start of the game, and depending how long the game is, it's probably a lot less than 12, but it's still like an overall, like, like, it may be like, I'm just making up a number, it may be 3, 4, 5, 7% like increase, but it's an overall buff to the like actual production of Zerg though at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely.
I think what Shu was saying is interesting about looking at interactions of like when the Reaper first laying is faster and things like that. That's definitely something that I've noticed, because like I said earlier, it's like all of your tech is available earlier now from like a worker perspective relatively. So it kind of feels like you're still like, you want to be droning up the same amount that you would normally, because you're still dealing with the same like Starcraft dynamics of what the supply cap is and like how much income you get. Like you're just sort of always going to be encouraged to go to 3-base saturation because of this, right? So it's like we've still got that incentive to drone up to 3 bases, but because things like the Reaper and Adept are earlier relatively based on our worker count, it's a little bit lopsided, So it's like our extra droning mechanic with the extra larva, like that's nice, but if we're like losing workers to the first Adept and Reaper a little bit more, then it kind of balances out. I don't know. I think that's why this is like such a hard patch to judge, like, is Zerg really strong right now? I think before we changed the hatch and queen costs, it was pretty easy to say that Zerg was too strong, but now I think it's way too hard to tell.
The math is a bit fuzzy with it. Like I said, speaking from the Terran perspective, like you're skipping the SCV to get the Reaper out faster. You are going to get the Reaper out faster, and you're probably going to get maybe a kill, maybe 2 kills, depending on how well they control their drones. If they don't get any kills and save for a morph on the drone and smart with how they protect the drones, you might not get any, and in which case it's a sunk cost that you've kind of not really paid off in that early stage. But if you also don't sacrifice the extra SCV that you would otherwise have, and you delay getting you gas to like 15 supply, I think, then you have enough time to make a Marine first before the Reaper starts, and the timing kind of lines up there, but you lose out on all the time of being able to kill a drone, get a couple of lings or anything before the Queen pops out, and it feels very bizarre, I suppose is the best way to put it. I will say that things like 2-Rax Reaper pressure is really effective against Zerg at the moment, but that's also very committed as well.
Yeah, I can feel that. All right, do we want to talk about Protoss now? How do we feel about the warp gate and gateway changes? Have we formed opinions on that yet?
Honestly, I haven't run into many Protoss at the moment to know a whole lot of TVP.
Yeah.
Which is a bit frustrating.
Yeah.
Because like I did genuinely want to play some TVP to actually formulate an opinion, but there really haven't been that many people playing. And on the one hand, I don't blame them, because it's kind of frustrating from the Protoss perspective. And I was talking to Nelson a couple of weeks back about this, where they go through not necessarily like full redesign, but they went through the mothership core era, the shield battery era, the battery overcharge era, the energy recharge era, and now redesigning warp gate. And it's like it just keeps happening, so they keep having to relearn and change how they play over and over and over again. So there's a point of, is this just going to keep happening? Am I actually going to be able to commit to this and right. not have to constantly keep relearning shit all over again? And I can feel the frustration from them on that part. But on the other hand, I also kind of can't deny that Protoss was wildly overtuned on the previous patch. Like they really were. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They were so overtuned on the previous patch.
It's a little hard to deny at this point.
I know that there have been people that will just be like, oh, but what about the world champions? And it's like, bro, that happened once a year. That is a sample size of 1 per year. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I do agree that with Nelson in chat is saying TOS needs identity, and I kind of feel like the desire to have stronger gateway units has kind of muddled TOS's identity of having weaker fodder but stronger tech, and leaning into the tech heavy playstyle that TOS has historically had in Wings of Liberty and to some extent Heart of the Swarm. And I think that's partly a direct result of just trying to buff gateway units. And this has been a thing that has kind of happened over the course of basically the last 10 years by trying to make chargelets stronger with the impact damage and then removing that and then changing charge so it's now gives the speed, and then changing stalkers so that they have stronger auto attacks but fire slightly slower. And there was a period in time where I think they could like 2 or 3 shot Marines, which was just fucking disgustingly broken, so we won't even talk about that. But the point remains, like there's been this push to try and make gateway units stronger, and while I don't necessarily agree with it, I kind of feel like it comes from a place of like Brood War nostalgia. But here's the thing, this isn't Brood War, it's Starcraft 2. Protoss has always been very different in Brood War compared to Starcraft 2, and it should be different. They are different games.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, you know. I think we are all familiar with the desire for, you know, Protoss to have stronger gateway units, and how that's really difficult to do because there's Warp Gate in StarCraft 2. So it's like, you kind of can't have Zealots be, you know, the terror that they were in Brood War in StarCraft 2. Even though, like, they're already crazy good. And here's, you know, the other challenge that I have with this whenever this comes up, and I'm sure Miro and Relin will agree with me here, but gateway units are already pretty goddamn good. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're seeing and have been seeing quite a lot of games ending with just gateway units for years now. So it's like, what are we even talking about at this point? Like, are they not strong enough? Like, we've already done like a ton of work on the Stalker, for example. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, but the Legacy of the Void launch Stalker, like, that Stalker was way more like a movie and flimsy. Like, it was like paper mache, you know? And then they tweaked the numbers so that it's a lot more microable, and the DPS is like similar but a little bit better, if I remember right.
I don't think I would call it weaker in the sense, that you mentioned it was more flimsy, and the stats of the Stalker didn't change outside of the damage and attack speed. So it still had the same strength, but it took more. It took more attack
like, you can't like
speed.
do the blink micro trick as easily. Like, they changed like the attack point and like some stuff about its fire rate. Here, I'm gonna try to find it.
Did they?
Because,
I don't remember them changing the damage point on it.
I think it was damage point. Maybe I could be wrong. Here,
I don't think it was the damage point, but let me.
What did they do? They blah blah blah, train time, blink, blah blah blah. Here we go. Well, there's 2 sets of changes.
Yeah, because originally they changed it to do 15. They 3-shot Marines, like I said before.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the 2017
so they attacked
change.
slower. They attacked slower from the original Stalker, and then they brought it a little bit further back, but made the attack speed slightly faster, so it was halfway in between. But they didn't change the damage point. And for context, for the people who don't know, damage point is basically
like the point in the animation.
How essentially where the attack goes off, and so for a Marine, the damage point is very low, so its attack gets off very, very quickly. And this is one of the things that, you know, when they changed the Vikings damage point, they made it more microable.
Yeah, because it allows you to stutter step easier, basically, is what it means. Because the attack goes off faster. Yeah, they reduce the damage a little bit.
It went from 10 to 15 originally. Yeah, and that was too strong. Okay. And then they made it 15 to 13.
Yeah, okay. I see what you're talking about. Yeah, so originally it was like a lot more A movie, and then they made it like super snipe a unit and then blink out. And then they kind of found a middle ground, right?
Yeah.
But my point of this, the reason why I was bringing this up, it's just like we went through this redesign and rework of the Stalker and, you know, a couple other units. And gateway units feel pretty damn good, you know, so I'm not really sure that I understand the desire for stronger gateway units as much anymore as I used to. But I don't know, like I do get where it's coming from a little bit. The problem that I have is like, is what we're doing a good idea? Because increasing production time is like not a small thing, you know? So I don't know, like I think that's like a pretty big change that is really gonna need like a lot of time, which is the unfortunate thing that like Protosses have to deal with like every fucking like 2-3 years now. Like they go through some major change and then have to relearn all this shit. And meanwhile, we're like, are they stronger? Are they weaker? I have no fucking idea. Because nobody knows how to play Protoss anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I have a slightly different view on this, so to speak. So, one of the reasons that a lot of non-Protoss players don't like gateway units or they feel strong is not by how strong they are in the late game or anything, but like generally how strong they are like at their strongest point in the game. So example, if you think about the previous patch, you have to think about Blink Stalkers not at the 10-minute mark, but like when they do a Blink Stalker all in against Terran, like they're very strong at that very particular point. So like the way I like to imagine or like explain it to people, I'm like, imagine how strong the Immortal would be right now is if the Immortal teleported right next to the main army when it was attacking. Like they would be significantly stronger in all ends. And people would start complaining about them and they would nerf them. This is not to say that I think gateway units are trash, but they have their niches, and like in certain scenarios they really do fall off. Example, if you're making stalkers versus like workers or broods in most scenarios, you are not in a good scenario. The way the unit works is that they support other units such as like the Stargate and like robo units that come out, like the Immortals and the Colossus and stuff.
Their role changes.
Yeah, but when Protoss complain that their units are not strong, they have like some merit to them, not at the 2-base stage like when they do an all-in, but like we're talking at a stage where a worker tech first comes out or something.
No,
like,
I get what you're saying.
I see where they're coming from, but at the same time, the reason I don't personally like this change is the one word warp in time is no longer determined by slow warp in. What they basically just did is that they made it where any pylon on the field can become a strong all-in
it went back to Heart of the Swarm.
And it went back to Heart of the Swarm, but like that's not like the handicapping feature. Like you could theoretically buff gateway units in general, because example, Miro would argue, I already know what he would argue, is that Blink Stalkers at one time were very, very strong on 2-base. Like Blink Stalker all-ins were crazy good. But it's not the Stalker or the Blink upgrade. It's the fact that there's a Warp Prism nearby and you get like 7 Stalkers that are blinked right next to each other, right on the front lines, and then the Warp Prism also acts as an extra blink. That's why it's strong. You have instantaneous reinforcements.
Part of the reason why it's strong.
Yeah, but like, Miro, imagine like in those scenarios, like where you're facing like Protoss and you're starting to whittle down the army, and you're like, oh yeah, I got them down to like 7-8 Stalkers, and then they just warp in, they double their Stalker account again, immediately right next to their Stalkers. Like that's why it's a problem. Like it's the same thing. Like Ace, like how good would like Zealot all-ins be if the Zealots had to actually travel and walk across the map for 25 seconds? They would be nowhere near as good. The reason that these units are like Protoss players complain about them is that they are not good in the mid game when certain techs come out, like workers for example, but they're also really, really strong at certain stages of the game because of that instantaneous reinforcements. And I honestly believe that having the no slow warp in thing is not a good change. They're trying to introduce like attacks on the warp gate, which is like I guess like an okay idea, but like they're making like these two like changes seem to conflict with the overall direction of the game of like what they want actually out of Protoss. Like
it's antithetical to what they were trying to do with it.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me like when I actually read this. Like I would prefer if they just simply had like a warp gate thing where instead of it actually transforming into a warp gate, the units just came out faster, but there was no such thing as a warp in at all. Because then you could actually manipulate what the units do. Example, you could be like, I think Blink or Stalkers or Adepts could be like this good, or like we're increasing the shields, or like the cooldown on Blink, or like any of these other things.
Wait,
because now you suddenly don't have to worry about the all-ins anymore.
Are you saying like get rid of Warp Gate entirely? What do you mean? You
Either
lost me there.
remove it or make it where everything's a slow warp in. If you get my
picture. Everything like no fast warp in.
Yeah, because like the fast warp in.
We've talked about that before.
Prism, yeah, is like the main, because like when I read this being like warp in is no longer determined by slow warp in power, like you just essentially made it where all-ins are stronger again. But the counteract to that, you're like, oh, let me introduce attacks of the 25-25 to the warp in. But that doesn't really, like, to me it just sounds like they don't know what to do. When I read this.
I get what you're saying.
Counterpoint to this, I think there should be a fast warp in. But I think fast warp-in should be relegated specifically for Defender's Advantage. Which I feel like, if you're warping in around a Nexus or around a gateway on your side of the map, preferably around a Nexus, let's say that, the Nexus has a decent-sized field, your warp-in is buffed. Okay?
Yeah.
If you're warping in on the other side of the map through a Warp Prism or a Pylon or a warp Gate, whatever, it should be slow warp in, because then there's no Defender's Advantage otherwise. And that would fix a really big problem with PvP in particular that a lot of Protoss have historically complained about, that there is no Defender's Advantage.
Hmm.
Yeah, like I would
Um,
I would I would like them to experiment with just removing warp gate, like then making it where the gateways act like barracks to a degree, and you just
that's
produce.
kind of what they've tried to do with this
Yeah,
patch, though.
and
No, I
Protoss
mean
are like,
like
no, I'm gonna pay 2025, 25, and just to warp in
And and
yeah,
defensively.
honestly, I
You know?
kind of understand why, because Warpgate
no,
is just better.
no, I understand like why they do it, but I think like I would you can't do like a half-ass measure here. You got to go all in, or because if you
Yeah,
give them
yeah,
an option
yeah.
out, they're going to do the option out. And I said that before. Like you can make the warp gate
I
fifty
mean,
fifty, and pros are still going to warp it into a warp gate because the ability to put the unit where you want it is like
yeah.
vital in so much scenarios.
I mean, I
It
think
is
the
worth that
biggest
cost.
situation where this matters is defensively, right? Because like, you know, if you have shield batteries, like having the ability to warp in is what you need to defend, right? Because then you can just
Yeah.
warp in units wherever you have a battery because you're gonna have power there, right? And this is like, you know, why I've always had problems with the shield battery because it basically just allows Protoss to defend without having to have any units, right? Whereas
Hmm.
previously, I don't know if you guys remember this, start of Legacy of the Void, Protoss used to keep a couple stalkers at home to defend against shit. You know? Like,
Yeah.
they used to keep some units at home because they would be like, well, you know, I gotta keep something between my main and my natural in case I get dropped in one of those bases, you know? Because they're just gonna snipe the cannon immediately and then I'm not gonna have anything. You know, so they had
Yeah.
to have some units to defend. Then you introduce the shield battery, you don't have to do that anymore. Now you can just warp in defensively. So it's like, I
Yeah.
think if we want to get rid of warp gate, like we have to actually like get rid of warp gate, like you're saying, like completely remove it.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
I think.
if you still have the shield battery, no matter how much it costs, like if you can afford it and it's at all viable, that's just always going to be the option you prefer, I think. You know what I mean?
I mean, the other thing I was going to say with this is that if you completely remove warp gate, certain players are going to suffer. Obviously, I would argue if you were in Diamond League, you are over reliant on warp gate to a certain measure. However, I do think pros are going to actually benefit from it because if you can make it where the cooldowns are low enough out of just a normal gateway with warp gate research, so to speak, like in air quotes, you can make it where players can like, you know, they will become better
Zag their
at it.
opponent.
As example, like one thing I heard from someone, because I do watch other people play other races, not just Zerg on Twitch, but I have watched other Protoss players play it. And one thing I noticed, and even one of them pointed this out, is that if you were playing Protoss on the previous patch with 12 workers, and let's say you wanted to warp in, and you don't have a warp prism nearby, or even if you do in certain scenarios, you are forced to look away from your army. It is guaranteed. However, if you were playing the other two races, you can hit your barracks button and queue up a bunch of units, or if you're Zerg, you can hit your hatchery button, your larva button, and then hit your
Right.
Zergling button and hotkey the Zerglings right into your army without even ever looking away.
Yeah.
You preemptively want to inject generally beforehand, but you never theoretically have to look away from your army. If it is a gateway mechanism, you can do the exact same thing Terran does, where you're not forced to look away. You can theoretically micro, which could be advantageous if you want the game to be more micro intensive. And it also makes it where people actually have to think about where they place their units, because in the current patch, I mean, on the previous patch, if anything happens to you at any point and you're woefully unprepared, you just warp in there with a shield battery.
Right.
And like when I read this particular patch, them like increasing it from to 25-25 and them also reducing like removing the slow warp in, they're doing like the exact opposite of what they should be doing, because they're like, hey, like it when they do the gateway cooldowns, they're trying to encourage people not to transform in the warp gate, but then they're also like, hey, we're also not going to penalize you if you don't have a gateway next to your pylon anymore. I'm like, why'd you do that then? Like, you're contradicting yourself when I'm reading
Yeah.
this.
Okay, so I kind of want to zero in on, especially because Heaven just said this in chat here, and I've been also thinking about this. Like, ever since these were introduced, I'm not even gonna lie, I've just been wondering, like, is this really a nerf? It's definitely a change, but like, what I wonder is, you know, what can be done with the untransformed gateway that has increased production speed after you research warp gate? which we don't have a name for. Harstem, I think, was talking about this, or maybe it was Wardy. I was watching somebody stream and they were like, fast gates, speed gates, like what do we call these? You know, goober gates. Yeah, sure.
I like goober gates because I had to say gateway. Yeah, I had to say warp gates in air quotes because like there's not really a name for
they're
them,
not
but you recognize
warp
what,
gates.
yeah, like what you were saying.
They're pseudo gates.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, anyway, what I was saying was ever since that change was introduced, you know, or proposed in the PTR, I've been kind of wondering like what can you do with that? Because if it's like a 40% production increase on paper, then hypothetically what I think about is, and I've said this before on the show, you know, you don't increase your mining by 40% at the same time, right? So how do you take advantage of that? You try to build less gateways and expand earlier, or go into other tech earlier. You know, you spend the money somewhere else, right? And then you can produce the same number of gateway units on production that cost you less money because you had to spend less money on that production. You didn't build as many gateways, right? And I've played a couple games against Protoss players who did this to me, and I could feel it, where I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, these units are kind of trickling in, but they feel like they're trickling in faster than they should be. And I'm looking at, like, what he has, and I'm like, the math doesn't make sense to me. How does he have a third base while he's also hitting me with all these stalkers? How does that work? You know, it's because he's on 3 gateways. I would look in the replay, and I was like, oh, he's using the fast gates. And he's just got 3 gateways, and he's transforming them and then producing out of them constantly, building up a big ball, and then moving out while he takes his third. And I was like, that's really interesting. Because that's what I kept thinking about when that idea was proposed. It's like, there's got to be a way to take advantage of this. So yeah, it's definitely a nerf to the traditional, like, a charge lot or a glaive all in with the prism, where you fly it into the Zerg main and then warp in. Because now you got to pay 25 for every gateway, right? So that's definitely a nerf. But overall, is it a buff or a nerf to Protoss is a little bit hard to say, because you're also unlocking a whole new set of options that could be really fucking strong, you know?
Yeah. Thing, right? I feel like a smart Protoss should be producing from the gateway. And then as they're going over to the other side to attack, they should be changing their gateways to warp gates to have the front-loaded warp-in time, so that they have the forward warp-in point and don't have to deal with the problems of travel time that the warp-in offsets.
Right.
You also don't have to deal with, you know, walls at that point, because that's the other thing that Protoss players are going to have to deal with, is like where your production is to some extent a bit decentralized, because you're often using warp gates or gateways as, you know, walls for protecting your third base or your fourth base or whatever else. So you're going to have to figure out rally points, and you're going to have sim city issues because a lot of people will just scatter warp gates or gateways around their base, and you're going to have players getting units stuck in their gateways because they've locked them in because of bad sim city. You're going to have the problem of, you know, and this has been something that Rogue has done in the past to Terran players, where he's dropped changelings on the ramp and put them on hold position, and the Terran players had all of these rallied units stuck behind changelings that can't get past. But for Protoss, it would also be, oh, I've got one unit on hold position in the wall, prevent lings from doing run-bys. All of my units are now stuck behind the wall. Where are my units? So there's going to be a lot of weirdness with that.
I've done that with Protoss already. When I do Roadshaw wins, I put a changeling to try to stop immortal reinforcements, and I've done that successfully in the past. So like, it's just the bigger net you could cast, so to speak, but it still exists.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, this is, you know, you guys are talking about mistakes that are definitely on the player, but like,
my point is, there's a lot of
it's an added
things
complication
that you now have to adapt to.
Yeah.
Yes.
That you didn't necessarily have to adapt to before.
Definitely would agree with that. What I'm curious about, like the thing that comes up in my mind is, because I'm thinking of PVZ, right? Because I'm a Zerg, so I'm thinking of what is Protoss gonna do to me, and I'm thinking, if I was a Protoss and I got these changes here, the build I would want to do would be something like I would want to go for the Stargate into Stargate, maybe 2-gate opener, right? Maybe just double Chrono Adept, right? And then go into the surprise 6 adepts without glaives, like surprise 6 to 9 adepts without glaives, but do it off of 3 gateways with the fast gates, right? And then take your fast third like you normally would, and like go up to like Storm, or actually it'd probably be better to go to like Colossus or something, because you're gonna have low gateway count, right? And then
I will say
you
Storm
could go like
definitely
super
does
hard
feel nerfed on
macro
the new
after
patch.
that, right? I don't know. That's just the build that comes up in my mind. I'm like, that just seems very attractive to me.
Something that I wonder if we'll see is something a bit more basic, which is like the really really old, 4-gate, or in this case potentially 3-gate builds. Once Warpgate is researched, where you're just like ranking out units, especially if it's proxied.
Right.
I wonder if you'll see something like that again.
Oh, wait. Because hang on. What if you did a 2-gate and you macroed slightly behind it? Because if it's a 40% production increase, that leaves you with like a 10% buffer, right? You get what I'm saying? So that extra 10% will go to your worker production.
I feel I need to point this out, because I mentioned this in chat already, but it's not a 40% production increase, it's a 40% reduction in production time.
Right.
Which correlates to 66% faster
right.
production. So it's actually
right.
more
I
than
totally
40%,
forgot about that.
66%.
I keep thinking of it as a plus 40%, but it's not. It's minus 40%
it's a minus
to the
40%.
time. Yeah, that's way bigger. Jesus. Yeah, this is definitely strong.
Well, that's what I mean. Go ahead, Miro.
I was just going to say, it's absolutely strong, and I think there's a lot of potential options that come out of it, which is part of why I was kind of thinking, as Ewu said in chat earlier, like, you don't have to keep your warp gates as warp gates anymore. You can swap back and forth. But I also don't think that it's anywhere nearly as easy as that, because the math becomes very fuzzy when you're working with gateways that are on, a Zealot with 16-second build time is very different than a Zealot with a 22-second build time from warp gate. And it seems like a very small thing, but the minerals add up between then. So how many gateways you need for a 3 gateway production is very different from how many gateways you might need for warp gate production, because of the mineral income change.
Yeah.
They changed, but
oh yeah, and then Evan is also saying like it's not really right to compare, because if we're saying like minus 40% to the production time, like that's minus 40% to the production time on a gateway, but from a warp gate it's much less, I guess. So it's effectively 21% faster. Okay. This is the other thing that I was wondering about. Yeah, because I was aware of that. And then also it's like, I'm assuming, Heaven, that you're looking at the warp gate cooldown time, right? Not the production time. That wouldn't make any sense. The production time is what, like 5 seconds or something?
yeah, that's
cooldown
true.
time from last patch. Yeah, that makes sense.
So
yeah.
So the production build time off gateways was like 27 seconds, but warp gate was 23 seconds originally. So it is faster, but it's not quite as fast. And again, the math is a little bit fuzzy, because Zealots and Adept produce slightly slower on warp gate now, but Zealots and Adepts produce faster on gateways, and Zealots produce faster than Adepts do on gateways now too.
Right.
And yeah, I think Stalker and Zealot is 16 seconds, and Adepts are 18, and Sentries are 14 if memory serves.
I have no idea.
I mean, I don't really care about.
You have it up on your stream.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I personally
Yeah,
don't
here it
really
is.
care about the time because
Yeah,
my
Century is
argument's
14.
very, yeah, it's the same regardless. Like, if you completely remove Warp Gate, you can increment with the times, and on top of that, because the all-ins are not as strong anymore, you can actually make like better Twilight upgrades. Like, you can make a higher tech Twilight upgrade, which will affect Stalkers, Adepts, Zealots in the late game, because you don't have to worry about it like charge plus whatever, like another zealot buff to the
Yeah,
2 day
with all
solid,
due respect,
because there's no
we
such
don't
thing as a
do
warp in of like with a warp prism anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you can tinkle with like numbers, you can like
Yeah.
fudge all of this, like the times, the like anything really. But like,
I see
because
where
you
you're
have warp
coming.
gate, you are like essentially like it doesn't change anything.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
like
I think we can't really remove Warp Gate though. Like I think I don't know. Like I kind
think-
of am on the side of like Warp Gate is a little bit Protoss identity. Like because in
Who cares
StarCraft 2
about
it's literally in the
No.
Legacy of the Void cinematic. Like
here's the thing. I care. Like I actually care a lot, right? I feel like Protoss needs to have something that makes them feel unique, and Warp Gate is that thing. Now, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea is irrelevant. It has been part
Yeah,
of the
it's
game
too
for the
late.
last 16 years,
yeah.
and it is central to their identity and a huge part of the reason why players play Protoss as it is. And yes, you can say, ooh, the high-tech units, the fancy units, sure, whatever. From a purely balanced standpoint, Warpgate is probably a terrible, terrible idea for so many different reasons that I won't go into now. But at this point, I also don't think we can just straight up remove Warpgate without completely tearing Protoss apart and redesigning it from the ground up. And you can't do that in a game that is 16 years old, that gets patched maybe once every 6 months, and whose PTR is consistently we're going to do 3 weeks of testing, 1 week of try it on this patch with like 3 days, and then we're just going to shove it in, changed again, without actually telling you what the changes are, and make it go live, and then you have to suffer for the next 6 months. Because that's happened the last 3 fucking times in a row.
So let's just continue doing it instead of implementing my change, Miro. Is that what you're saying? Also, Ace, I completely disagree with what you said. Who cares about the cinematics or like the identity of Protoss? I'd rather have a stronger player count with more people playing StarCraft 2 than like having Protoss have an identity and the game dying over here. Sorry for the controversial opinion. And then like my argument's very simplistic. Do a full measure. If we don't like it, we can always revert it. And like you're saying, like, oh, like we can't remove Warp Gate because that's too like they're changing too much, as opposed to all the changes that we've seen over Protoss the last 2 to 3 years. Are you serious?
Relevant. With all due respect, I would be completely on board with that if this was 2015 and we didn't have to live with it for the next 6 months to a year, in which the entire player base would just do a mass exodus. If you're stuck with that for a year, that is a huge fucking problem, and you're just going to see everyone leave.
So you would prefer to see a slow death compared to a fast death? I'm just curious.
I mean, kind of. With a slow death, you still have the potential option of bringing people back over time. Whereas with a fast death, if you lose everyone in the next month, the game is dead and there is nothing you can do about it.
All I'm saying is that if we had my opinions in 2020, we wouldn't even be in the current state we are right now. Like, at a certain point, you have to do a full measure. You can't be doing all these half-ass measures that don't do anything in the long run.
Yeah, okay, I don't know.
I want to point out the thing with Stormgate, right? And the reason I bring this up is because it is relevant to this conversation. Stormgate tried this. Stormgate did a massive redesign of I think it was Infernals, and they redesigned Celestials to some extent, and by that time the changes were already so polarizing. They lost literally every single fucking player, and there was a few other caveats to that played into it as well.
Way bigger.
Okay, so not listening to the player base is a big one.
I would argue the biggest.
But what I was going to say is, there was a mass exodus of players, and not a single one of them came back.
I would make the argument that before Stormgate ever launched officially as like this is released, I knew the game was gonna fail because the game was released without a single player. And 90% of the people who play StarCraft are a bunch of casual Andes. And the same thing would apply to Stormgate. The only reason I even played StarCraft and even got in the multiplayer is because of the campaign.
Yep.
Yeah,
No campaign equals no game, essentially.
Yep.
Like, any argument you make beyond that is meaningless to me. Like, they could have not changed the game, did drastic change, no changes at all, meaningless, because you didn't have a campaign, the game was destined to fail.
They're
Like,
still
that's my
making
argument.
Command and Conquer games, and Command and Conquer
So-
was never the greatest fucking RTS esport, but you know what it did have? An amazing campaign.
Exactly. Like,
I agree. I'm not going to disagree with the
Yeah.
fact that.
Sorry, I like that point, so anytime that comes up, I gotta agree with it.
yeah. Anytime someone brings up Stormgate, I don't really care about it because it was doomed to fail from the start.
Okay,
It's a mute point
starting
from the start.
Stormgate with no campaign was definitely a mistake. I 100% agree. They didn't have a vision. They didn't have a whole bunch of things that they really should have had. They just kind of went, we're going to make the next StarCraft 2, and that was that, you know?
Yeah.
But what I will say is Stormgate had a big player base and big following from the beginning. And while they didn't have a single player, it did have a large player base that they then subsequently lost because of really bad decision after really bad decision after really bad decision. And all the feedback that they were being told, you know, hey, these are problems, they completely ignored. And by the time the redesign came around, there was a third of the player base left, and then the redesign came around, and then all the players left.
I understand what you're saying, but you have to like demonstrate
My
the correlation
point
causation
is-
between these two. You have no
My-
idea if the game was going to die regardless of the changes or not.
I mean, the point I'm trying to make is the changes that they made, the redesign, didn't just drive players away. It meant that any player base they had was now gone, and they had no opportunity to come back. And we
Yeah.
are in that position in StarCraft 2. If you make changes to a game this old, that drastic, you are liable to drive every single player you have left away. And Blizzard doesn't want that.
Well,
Like,
let me
Blizzard
put-
just doesn't want that, because like whether it's a huge cash cow or not, they still make money from it. They are still getting skin sales, they're still getting co-op commander sales, they're still getting game sales off
And it's
the
IP
Legacy
value.
of Void and the Heart of Swarm campaign, and there is IP value to it.
who
But if you drive everyone away, then there is none of that, and you don't get any cash inflow anymore.
when I say things like remove Warpgate, I'm strictly talking about multiplayer. You can keep busted and broken things in the co-op. Everything is like every other ability is broken in co-op. Who cares about that? I'm strictly talking like, once again, you can also look at this like you may be correct because, example, they may make an implement of a change and the change goes wrong and everyone goes away. I accept that as a possibility. However, I would argue that if StarCraft actually wants to keep the value of their game, the IP, so on and so forth, maybe you need to invest in having a patch more than once a year. Just throwing that out there. Call it controversial. Maybe have a patch every season.
Controversial opinion. I think that is completely sound opinion, and that is an opinion I agree with. If we were to have players, if we would have patches once a month, then big changes like that wouldn't be a problem. But if you have to stick with them for the next 6 months to a year, yeah, it's gonna be a really big fucking issue.
Yeah.
Because,
so
like-
I gotta stop you guys here because we're just gonna go back and forth on this forever here. but
We are,
but
yeah,
I
that's
will
true.
have to kind of summarize a little bit, and I think I kind of agree with Miro a little bit, but I definitely see both sides of this because it's like, on the one hand, you want the game to be as good as it possibly can, right? So, you know, if there's like major problems with the game that need a major redesign to solve, then we should probably tackle those, right? And the sooner the better. But that's the other side of it, is the sooner the better, and there might be a point, and probably is, and we're probably at a point where it can be too late. You know, it's too late. to do these kind of major changes. And the reason for that is twofold, because you got players who have been playing it for decades now, right? And then we've got, Blizzard support. Is it there? How much is it going to be there for? How much like actual effort are they going to put into this? Like, because if they're not around to tweak and adjust things when problems come up, then undertaking like a major redesign is a massive risk, So I think I'm trying to be fair to both sides here. I think that's a good summary.
I mean, reducing the worker count from 12 to 8, so by most
also a big
standards,
change. Yeah, I mean that was the main reason I was in opposition to that. Because I think it's just too risky.
You need something to shake up and actually like have people be like, oh, maybe I should start playing Starcraft again.
Maybe, because on the flip side of that, I mean, we fucking marathon Starcraft yesterday, did we not?
Oh yeah.
That was the first time in what? How many years?
Yeah.
We haven't done that in a long time.
I had in Starcraft in a very long time. It felt new and refreshing.
Yeah.
And having a controversial change, I think, granted, I do agree with Miro, you can have too controversial of a change, but I think in this particular instance, I think it would do more beneficial than negative. We can move on to another topic since you don't want to keep rehashing it.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Last
so
thing I will say on
hang
this,
on.
like,
Let's move on here.
Say one last thing?
Sure.
Going to the 8 worker start, I do feel like is a very different change than just flat out removing Warpgate, because the 8 worker start change affects everyone, not just Warpgate, not just gateways. It affects literally every single player in the game, to the point where it essentially forces every single player from the ground up to relearn the game and learn new build orders and learn new things, and forces them to experiment. And I don't think Warpgate does that anywhere nearly to the same extent, other than just kind of pissing Protoss players off.
I agree with what you're saying, but like, what a time to do it when everyone else is still relearning the game.
Yeah, but then there's also the point of you also come down to the point of
both at the same time, to be honest.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't know.
I kind of agree. I kind of agree with that. Yeah.
If they weren't going to do anything with Warpgate, it would be like every other patch, and I wouldn't even care. But like, to me, they're doing a half measure, and I don't like it. Either commit to the idea or don't commit to the idea.
All right.
This is what I teach my students.
All right. We're moving on. Moving on.
All
right. Let's talk about the ghost.
Okay.
So the ghost. We gotta dissect this a little bit. I guess. I don't know. We've kind of already talked about this a lot, and really, I just want to know if you guys have opinions on this yet. And I honestly don't. I think I'm still at the same place I was last week, where, I feel like overall, I don't understand why we're tweaking the ghost. I feel like after, several years of the community arguing about, are ghosts too strong, we finally got them to a place where they feel good in both relevant matchups in, TVP and in TVZ. I think they feel pretty good and pretty balanced, right? And they're not super crazy massing like they used to be, but still strong. So my main question about, why are we doing this? It's just like, what's the point of buffing the ghost right now or making changes to the ghost when like we just went through this and it was so hard to get it to a spot where the community like wasn't arguing about it passionately anymore. And, so why fuck with it after we finally got it to a good place? That's my only thoughts on this. I don't have an opinion on whether it's currently too strong or too weak or what the changes did. I have speculations about what they'll do, but I've already talked about those on the show. So just wondering if you guys have any opinions on it yet.
Oh, I have opinions on this. Don't worry.
One game of team games, and he's got opinions on the ghost. Let's go.
Well, it's not just me. It's not just me like playing team games like for 30 games, but it's also like which there were ghosts in that game. But like, it's also the fact of me like watching other players play either with ghost or against ghost. And my
There's a
general
lot you can
opinion
learn
is,
from that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like watching like just good like GM Terrans or like GM Protosses or GM Zergs, like watching them see like how they interact with ghosts. I generally agree with what you said, Ace. I don't understand why they changed it, and you don't really have to like. Well, I shouldn't say that. I understand why they changed it. the last phrase of that whole balance thing under the ghost is why they changed it. No longer can be canceled upon taking damage. That's all you had to read there. I don't like how they changed the supply. I don't like how they changed the health. All of these things were in good spots, like the range, the movement speed. Why change anything that didn't need change? And just, to me, I think it punishes very high level Terrans, which is an example why when I was watching Maru versus Serral, that I'm not entirely sure if this was on the, I'm like 99% sure it was on the like current patch, like the 8-worker patch.
Right.
Maru wasn't making any ghosts, and I think it's because of the supply increase and the health increase, decrease. And the main reason is that if you think about someone that's like Clem, Maru, like these like elite player stats, like anyone that's over 5.5k, like who actually knows how to use the ghost to some ability, they're being punished for using the ghost. It's higher supply and it's more flimsy. And this is all for the sake of it not being canceled upon taking damage, which doesn't even apply to Protoss in most TDPs when they're using ghost, by the way. Very rarely will they use snipe or
I think the other
steady targeting, I should say.
The other big change though is the range change and the like auto attack damage change, because that makes Ghost Rush versus Zerg in the early game like actually kind of viable.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'm not gonna.
I mean, it already was kind of viable. Like, you know this already.
Yeah,
like, Ghost Hellbat has been around for a while.
Yeah, Ghost Hellbat's been like. I'm not gonna speak to that because I haven't like watched any games with that, and I haven't played against any games like that, like against people going like Hellbat Ghost. But what I will say is, I think it punishes good like Terran players higher up for the sake of like, you know, being nicer in certain few select scenarios, because I guess someone, to me, this reads that someone who, I don't want to be too cruel, but this reads that Terran players who ever made this didn't like the fact that their snipes are getting canceled. Like, it really just reads that. Like, every other change is centered around like trying to get this one change through, is what I read. Because if you don't do any of these changes, like the supply increase or like the health decrease, and you make it where snipes no longer cancelable, oh my goodness, is the Ghost OP. There is no denying it. You cannot sit there being like, oh, like imagine like the previous Ghost Ace, like right after they made them like weaker to Bailings, that they're like, also snipes no longer cancelable, being like, that's a little objectionable maybe. Like every Zerg on the planet would immediately be like, let's not get too far. Like,
yeah.
But like,
I see what you're
under
saying.
the current patch, like when they're doing like these nerfs and buffs, it only reads as like we're trying to not make it where it's no longer cancelable. That's all I read.
Yeah.
And
I kind of saw the same thing. I mean, but also like the range and auto attack damage. Like, yeah. I just saw it as like trying to make the Ghost more of a like early and mid game viable, and also to stop the canceling, because it seems like it's trying to prevent like using a fungal to like hit the ball of ghosts and then like all the snipes are gone, you know. It's trying to prevent that.
I can understand that to some degree, but I personally think that if they were to do a ghost change like this, like let's just say they increase it from 2 to 3, I think the least they could do is increase the Infestors and the High Templars in the same regard. Try to make it more cohesive, because I've said this before and you guys already know my opinions on this. I don't like people massing spellcasters in the game. Like if you think about like Infested Terran era, like where people are like, I have like 50 Infestors and I just drop.
Oh, please don't remind me of that.
Like, I don't like how people can just bank storms for like days. I don't like how people can bank snipe and EMPs and fungal. Like, I don't think these are good ideas in general. So, example, if you're like, I think maybe the ghosts in this iteration is too strong, let's make it 2 to 3 supply. At least you can be a little like cohesive with the idea and make High Templar 3 supply and Infestors 3 supply. Then I could maybe be a little bit more behind this. But at the current stage, I just don't like how the change reads at all, if you want my honest opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
Yeah, the Ghost was in a really good spot, and then they just changed it for no reason.
I think so. This kind of reads weirdly to me. And I'll talk about my experience playing with it in a moment, because I've had a few games with the Ghosts now. On the one hand, it kind of comes across to me as Protoss players are complaining that we can't use disruptors to one-shot ghosts anymore. Why the health nerf? If the health is getting nerfed, Banelings are going to be substantially more effective because Banelings are now 3-shotting them instead of 4-shotting them. And especially because of the light change that happened in the other patch where they went from 6 hits to 4 hits. So big cost change there, like cost effectiveness change there. But then there's also the thought of, okay, so if we're reducing the amount of health that they have and their effectiveness is hampered as a result of them being light and they're easier to kill, then why don't we make it so that you can get steady targeting off every time by making it no longer cancelable? But the problem with that is we've already seen how easy it is to mass ghosts when the supply is very low. So to offset that we're going to increase the supply.
Well, I
don't agree with the idea behind that. I need to preface that I don't agree with that direction because I do actually think that the ghost was in a pretty good spot before. I would even have argued that it would be fine to bring it back down to 100 health without changing the supply and without adjusting steady targeting whatsoever. I would actually have said that's probably completely okay. I don't necessarily think that this is healthy for the game where steady targeting is uncancelable. I do think, however, it does bring back the argument of exceptions that we've talked about in the past, where the ghost is the exception that your opponent can counter can stop the spell by doing damage, you know. And that was kind of always a weird quirk of the ghost when steady targeting was introduced, is that you can stop snipe from going off altogether, and that's never been the case with Fungal, it's never been the case with Infested Terrans, it's never been the case with Microbial Shroud, Viper Parabomb, Blinding Cloud, Raven, Interference Matrix, like any spell from any other race has never worked that way. So this is one of those weird things that it's kind of like, I kind of see like legitimate reasons for doing it because it brings things back in line. And again, pointing to abduct of like siege tanks not being abductable was the dumbest thing they could possibly have done, and it was another weird exception that we just didn't need to have. And I can kind of see why you might say like do that with the ghost as well. I don't really agree with it because I think steady targeting is a really fucking strong spell, but
for sure. I mean,
that's kind of why I think it needs the interruptible, because like, I mean, it's way too crazy to have such a high single target damage ability that has such long range not be cancelable. You know, like there's a reason why like it's a really long channel time, you know. But I don't know, you know. I get what you're saying though, because like you could also look at feedback, for example, but then with feedback, like we reduce the damage significantly so that it didn't do that anymore, right? But feedback was even crazier because it just snaps it. Like there's no channel time, it just happens.
It just snaps your neck and you game over, you know. Oops, you needed those Vipers? Too bad you don't have them anymore.
So you have a high energy unit? Now you don't.
No, I agree.
Feedback has always been very polarizing because like feedback was single-handedly responsible in Wings of Liberty for completely removing battle cruisers and Thors from the game, because at the time they had energy bars and it would literally just nuke 200 health from them.
I completely agree. I mean, I would also, and I've said this before, and maybe you guys run this opinion by you, but like I've like thought about, instead of doing all these crazy changes with like Ghost, because people are like, oh, like Snipe is too good, so we need to increase the supply to 2 to 3 if we don't make it cancelable. But I've thought in the past that because the supply is just one issue, but like you could also make it where every unit in the game or anything that contains energy in the game can't exceed over 150 instead of 200. So each Ghost technically can't cast as many snipes, but also it does this with a bunch of other things. So example, like why worry about like Zerg being like really good with infestors if like example each infestor has 50 less energy, and it can make it where
that's
maybe you don't have to increase this. I agree with that. Like instead, like I don't think that is a good change. I should preface it that I thought that would be a good change years ago, but I do think if they do change the Ghost supply to 2 to 3, that they should at least make it consistent and make the infestors 2 to 3 and High Templar 2 to 3. That's like my personal opinion on it.
Yeah, I could totally get behind that, actually. That like makes perfect logical sense. Like I'm totally behind that. Yeah,
like I said before, if people are upset like or like worried that like Snipe is going to be too good because it's no longer cancelable, like why not just make all of the spellcasters like 2 to 3 and then start worrying about like example
start tuning their power so that they
you can start tuning their power. Example, like High Templar, I'm sure we're all aware, have been changed quite a bit recently.
I don't know, that could be interesting. The thing is, like, it makes the races more samey. You know what I mean? Like, different races should be different. You know, like, I'm totally fine with the High Templar being a, like, uber powerful spellcaster. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm fine with that, but I think, like, just making them all 3 supply, like, I think you're right, like, each race should be different, but example, like, every race starts with the same workers. Like, certain things should be, like, uniform between the 3, and I think if you make,
there's
like...
a limit to how far you can stretch the races,
But I think if you were to make Ghosts 2 to 3 supply, like they just did, I think the least you should do is make it universal across 3 races, that, like, each of them should, like... You can maybe maybe make Neural a little bit stronger, like who knows, like make feedback a little stronger, like it doesn't really matter, like, but you can make it 2 to 3 supply and just maybe tweak the numbers a little bit on them, because that's what they're doing with the Ghost right now. Like we're gonna tweak the numbers, we're gonna tweak the health, we're gonna tweak this ability, their auto attack, but then we're gonna make it 3 supply instead of 2 supply, so you can't mask them. Like, or you can't mask them as easily.
Yeah, and we can just do that with all the casters. Yeah,
exactly.
I get your point.
But like, I feel like the reason I don't like this is because it goes against the other 2 races and like their uniformity. But if the other 2 races also got the same thing, I would be complaining a lot less about the Ghosts in general.
Sure.
Weirdly, I don't feel like that's completely necessary. Yes, I know I just talked about the whole exceptions thing, but kind of am leaning more into different races should be different, and I think it's okay for some spellcasters to be a little bit more expensive or a little bit different from each other. I don't think they all need to have the same supply or the same health or whatever else, because it just kind of leads them down to...
it's a little bit interesting because there definitely needs to be some level of consistency with like spellcasters, and that's why I think like the auto attacks being on all the spellcasters, I think, is just a great idea. I think the Raven is still missing one, right? Or did we get
and the
one
Viper,
for the
all the A units, all the A units,
Raven and the Viper, and I guess the Oracle.
The Oracle counts, but that's an activated ability. Like it doesn't have it. It doesn't have an auto attack. It's an activated ability. So
right.
It's a spell technically.
But I mean, the reason I don't like the Ghost change for the supply is because people can directly look at that and be like Terran weak. If you get, because like they're too comparable. Like each race has a spellcaster, but this race has a...
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Because but, like you don't.
I think anybody. I get what you're saying, but I think anybody who thinks about it fairly is going to be like, they're going to take one look at the Ghost and be like, wait, what can this do? And it has a good auto attack and like kind of good stats. Okay, now I understand the supply. Like,
yeah, you can see that, but like I think like you can change the other 2 though to make it more similar, because like the 3 supply just makes it.
I don't think we need to do that.
I mean, that's just what I would personally do, but like generally speaking, I don't like the Ghost change is what I would say.
Yeah.
Particularly if
I think
they
all
had done
3
this
of us
years.
Don't really like it.
Yeah, if they had done this particular change years ago.
Yeah.
when the ghost was really busted, I would be like, anything is better than the current version. But like when they changed it, the ghost was already in a good spot in my opinion, which is why I dislike it so much.
Yeah, same.
Particularly the health and supply, I really dislike. Like almost every change on there is not what I would say a good change.
So it's weird, right? Because I've played with Ghost a few times now, and there have been instances where the Ghost has felt absurdly strong.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have found instances in which it's just been really hard for ghosts in particular situations, particularly in lower numbers. Like if you're relying on them to get damage done when they're lower numbers, lower count, you know, if you manage to survive long enough that you've got 20 ghosts, like that's 60 supply of ghosts.
Yeah.
You know? If you are sitting there with 8 ghosts, even I had an issue yesterday. I was playing a game, and the Zerg just kept swamping my ghosts, and it didn't matter how many I had at that point in time, and it was great macro by him, and I did eventually hold off and win, but it was like every time I'd try to get enough ghosts to do anything, like they would die because they're so much more flimsy, and it was deceptive how little damage they could actually take as a direct result. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, on the off chance that they did get a shot off, if I wanted them to get a second shot off, then it was like they don't have any energy to do that anymore. So the amount of snipes you actually could get off with them was significantly reduced, and the amount of time you had to rebuild in between fights as a Zerg made a substantial amount of difference. Because like the thing of the energy cost isn't just about, oh, it's gone from 50 to 75, you can take one less shot, like you can do one less shot with it. It's also, not only do you have one less shot, but you also have to spend X amount more time waiting for the energy to be able to engage, which gives them time to build up again, and gives them time to it's like an extra 30 seconds of time where they can produce more units and get more income that you can't push, or you can't punish them anywhere nearly as effectively. And it actually caught me off guard how surprisingly difficult it was, especially with like the lava change over a 30-minute game. It was like, holy shit.
Over a 30-minute game, that's a big difference. Yeah.
Like,
they probably have like 100 extra larvae that you're dealing with. Yeah.
It's like, damn, dude. Like, it felt good to use, but it also, like, you had to be really careful with how you were using them as well. And
interesting.
Wait,
can you still cancel it?
I actually haven't tried. I
just thought of this. Yeah. Is it like not cancelable at all, or is it just it can't be interrupted? It says no longer cancels upon taking damage is what it actually says. So I guess you can still cancel it.
So I think you can still cancel it, and I think the Zerg can actually still cancel it if they get out of range.
That would be really hard, because most of the time, like,
usually
creep have a hard time getting away from that.
Doesn't it have a like leash range of like 30 or something?
No,
I mean, like,
it's not 30, it's 14.
So 14?
That's still a very
That's
large.
longer
That's
than a siege tank.
Okay.
Yeah, that's like,
it's less than Tempest range. If you're targeting something at max range and they move away before the snipe goes off and they're on creep, then they can actually break or interrupt the snipe.
Okay. So
burrow also is another way to do it.
Burrow will do it too. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Assuming they don't have detection.
I actually really want to try that. That's gotta be crazy. Okay, I think we gotta move on, because we've been talking about the ghosts for a really long time, and we're like way over time as usual. And I just I thought I lost my sound for a second. Okay, let's talk about the okay, so I kind of have like 4 or 5 questions. So I want to talk about the worker change, mineral gas change and supply changes, and then I have a question about the patch overall to kind of close things out. But I almost want to shove in another very quickly. I just want to talk about this medevac change because we haven't
this
really
is a straight up
talked
buff.
that
I'm
much
telling you
about it.
right now, this is a straight up buff.
It's huge for Terran. Have you guys seen that Hero Marine clip? I'm gonna pull it up. I'm gonna find it. Heaven posted it on Reddit.
I did that in one of my games. I think it was like yesterday. Like,
how do I find
picked
this?
up 6 medevacs worth of Marines fucking instantly and flew away. It was like, what?
If Heaven is still in chat, linking it would be nice, but I am trying to find it. But yeah, it's this insane clip of Hero Marine, and he's like back against the wall, has to lift up and move out, and he's got like a shit ton of units, and there's like banelings like approaching or something like that. I don't know if it was banelings.
It was Protoss.
It was Protoss,
Zealot,
yeah.
Storm, and Colossus.
Yeah. So it was like a big army, and he's like in a corner, has to pick up and boost out, and he's got a lot of units. And then he just like hits the button, and it's just zoop, and he's out of there. Like it's so fast.
Yeah, I just saw what. I just saw what Heaven posted, and that.
Oh, did he post it? There we go. Nice. Okay, I'm gonna put it on stream.
That looks so ridiculous. I'm so glad he posted that.
I'm gonna put it on stream.
It's crazy. It is a straight up buff, and it is a massive buff. And I
It's
genuinely
massive.
don't think it can. I genuinely do not think it can stay in the game as it currently is. Like I just don't. I think it's too good.
Let me look at this. Is this showing on stream? Okay, it cuts off the top a little. Okay, you can still see the mineral count. Okay, so we're good.
Yeah.
All right, watch this. Oh shit, Protoss coming.
Oh my god. Luckily we have this hotkey.
Look at that.
Insane.
Luckily we have this hotkey.
Like, what the fuck? One more time.
Oh my god. Luckily we have this hotkey.
What? That is insane.
It is.
Oh man. I just had to draw some more attention to this. I did try to talk about this a little bit last time, I think. But I think we gotta mention this again just because it's something that like nobody is really talking about. And I feel like this needs a lot more attention on it because this is not a quality of life change. This is a massive, massive Terran buff. Like huge.
Yeah, this is actually absolutely fucking incredibly massive. And I freely admit, like last week I said I wasn't a huge fan of it, and there were times where I was like, a bit iffy on it. But honestly, it's so big as a change, it's so big as a buff that I genuinely do not think it can stay in the game as it currently is. I just don't.
That I think is interesting. I don't know, because I think, like, in theory, you could keep this in the game. Like, I think you could. It's just, you have to acknowledge that this is a massive Terran buff. You know what I mean? I think that's really my problem with it. It's like, nobody's talking about it, or like how much of a huge buff it is for Terran. Because
so
if we were acknowledging that, it could be fine, like, in theory. Because we're talking about like a micro imbalance. Like, it doesn't actually make the medevac stronger, right? But like, it massively adjusts the amount of micro and skill that it takes to do hot pickups like that, which used to be something that was like, you know, kind of a pride of skill, of really skilled
if you could do that in half a
hard.
second, yeah, it was very hard to do it the old way, yeah, because you'd have to box select and then right click everything into individual medevacs, and it would
Very
take
difficult.
you
It looks
a
easy.
second and a half
It is
to do
not
that.
easy.
It's not easy
Yeah.
at all. And it's actually, it's even harder than it seems, because if your medevac control specifically is not really good, like you have to get the medevac in and out without it getting sniped, while also having units being surrounded, because like the units aren't just going to walk towards the medevac, they are stuck in place if they have been surrounded. So it's very
and the medevac
easy
is fast. Yeah.
It's very easy to like have your medevacs get stuck on the old way, and to some
Yeah.
extent the new way if you don't do it correctly, but much easier now than it was then.
Way
On the
easier.
old way, you would have to boost your medevac in, box select everything, right click the medevac, and boost out, right? And you'd have half a second to do that if you're doing it with one medevac. If you're doing it with 6 medevacs, it's a second and a half at most, and you have to react really fucking quickly. And if you can do that really fucking quickly, you can probably get it down to a full second. Okay? And that's you still have the potential to miss a lot of units doing that on the old way. This way, in and out, in, one button, out. It's less than half a second. It's not even a quarter of a second.
Yeah. You don't even have to look at the units anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I saw Uppatry doing it without even looking at his army. Like, he was like retreating or I can't remember the map, but like I can picture it in my head. It was like third base over here, like ramp here, and Uppatry's right here, and he's like, oh no, I gotta get out of here, and he like boosts out, but he did it like with the hotkey without looking at his army. Like he went to go macro, and then like somebody in chat was talking about the hot pickup button, and he's like, oh yeah, I can just do this. And he just hits the button and it picks up his units. It was like, what? That's crazy. Like, but I don't know. Just to be clear,
entirely agree
like,
with
I
that
think it's-
statement, because there's an element of, like I said, you can still, like, if you're not looking at them, you can absolutely still miss units.
Yeah. He did actually.
But
if I
it's much
remember
easier
right.
to do that. And
But, like-
at the very least, if you're not looking at them, then you'll still get some units out.
Yeah. But
Whereas
my
before,
overall
if
point
you're
with
not
this is
looking at
like,
them, then you lose all of them.
we could like this. It could, in theory, just be in the game now, and it could be fine. Like, the requirement for Terran to take a shit ton of micro to be able to pick up like that, like, that's not really part of the game design, right? But at the same time, like, bio being incredibly difficult to control is definitely part of how bio is balanced. You know what I mean? And to a certain
Yeah,
degree, that's a part
absolutely.
of bio's design as well. Like, it's a glass cannon army that you have to be very careful about your control with, And
Yeah.
it's a big change to do something like this, Like, the only thing missing, really, if you wanted to make bio like a really easy comp to control, would be to make it like auto split versus splash units and things like that, right? Like, if you did that plus this, suddenly Terran is like an almost a move composition for bio, right?
Okay, so
And like, that would be crazy, like a huge change.
So while I do think this is an absolutely massive buff to Terran, I want to say, let's just imagine for a moment, because every race got this. Let's just imagine for a moment that Protoss players with their 5 pickup range warp prisms had built, and obviously this is an absurd number because Protoss is very supply heavy. Let's imagine for a moment that they built 6 or 7 warp prisms and they just fly out. They just pick everything up from like 7 range and fly away.
Oh
And
man.
it's one of those things, like, I could actually see reasons to build more than 2 warp prisms a game. And most
are
of
you-
the time,
There's a
Most of the
barcode
time.
in my Twitch chat, and I'm not sure if I'm
Yeah.
okay with this. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. I was just about to say something to you.
I don't
That's really-
I don't know how I feel about this.
I feel I should also point out, since said barcode just made a comment that was so absolutely dumb. This is not a balance patch that was made by the Balance Council. The Balance Council
Yeah.
has been dead for a year.
Yeah,
And
this
a
is not the
half.
Balance Council.
This is Blizzard. Blizzard did this change. Now, there has been input from a couple other people who I'm not going to name, but this
we
is
don't need to get
almost
into that.
entirely Blizzard making these changes.
Yeah.
Not a Balance Council change.
So actually, I wanted to like bring something up with the medevac really quick. So like,
Yeah,
not
sure.
to sound like I'm a Zerg who's like whining like right now, but like is this like something that the other two races had, but it didn't benefit them as much, and they were like,
No,
"Oh,
no.
let's put it on Terran," or is it something that
They
like
gave
was
it to all 3 races this patch. So
Yeah,
Overlords
all
have
3
this,
races this
Warp
patch.
Prisms have this, Medivacs have this. They all have it.
Okay, that's why I was wondering because I didn't
Yeah.
remember reading anything with
But
the
the
Overlords.
reason
I was
it's
like,
such a
"Oh,
massive Terran buff is because Bio uses this
Yeah,
all
it's-
the time. And for
Yeah, that's
Zerg and
why-
Protoss, picking up like that, not something that we do. Like,
Okay,
yeah.
I was just wondering because like
Like,
I don't
like
really
we
know.
use that maybe 1 in 10 games. A Terran Bio player will use that 10 times every game. You know?
Yeah.
Like, it's a
It's
huge buff for
interesting you
Terran.
mentioned that. I actually think this might make it a little easier for, you know, evacing queens. If you're doing a queen push, you can fly them.
You wouldn't do
Yeah.
that though, because you're all in. Like, you would never
you
go
are very
back.
all in, I will say.
Yeah. To go back is to admit defeat.
Yeah.
We don't do that around here.
We
what if
only
you
press
have done
forward with
enough
the
damage,
queens.
but you haven't? What if you've done enough damage, but you haven't done so much damage that you outright kill them?
Well, I'm like, hold on, let me read this.
I
it
think you
has
just
load
lose.
by- Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that situation exists because, like, you don't have queens at home anymore. So you've just
That's
not
true.
been having larva production. So, like, I don't know.
That is
Like,
true,
I
yeah.
mean, I guess hypothetically, it could be true that you could reach a point where you're, like, even and they kill everything and they have, like, 1 Marine left over. You know? And it's like, all right, now you're just kind of reset. But I think in that situation, you would want to just trade it out.
Okay. I think we should move on because we are
Yeah,
starting.
agreed.
We've already gone past the hour and a half that we
Much
normally
past,
go.
yeah. So very quickly, let's do the big 3 that we've already talked to death on many previous weeks. So I'm hoping we can be fast on this. So we'll see.
Continue. Sorry for my
Continue.
laugh.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the worker change. What's the verdict? How do you guys feel about this now that we played a little bit on the live patch? Specifically just the worker change. How do you feel about that?
I still hate it.
Okay.
It affects so many things from the ground up for Terran, and to an extent Protoss as well. Just like build orders are so fucky, and the way everything lines up is just so flawed now, which it wasn't. And I want to bring up very quickly, because I don't know if anyone else has watched the interview that Harston had with David Kim. David Kim specifically mentions that they went through and tested a bunch of different things, and when they went from the 6 worker count to the 12 worker count, they found that it was at the 12 worker count. That was when build orders started to diverge. That was his exact quote: "Is at 12 workers, build orders started to diverge."
Yeah, what he
And I feel
specifically
like-
said was that's why they picked 12 workers, because that was
Yes.
the point where build orders branched out.
Yeah. So we've kind of gone back on that, and we're still at the same issue. Build orders start to diverge at 12 workers, but now we just have like 45 to 60 seconds worth of build-up time
yeah.
when nothing else is happening. Why?
I mean, it made ZVZ a little bit more gambly, you know? That's what we all wanted, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I'm also not a fan. You know, I don't know. I feel like slowing down the game for like that 45 seconds or whatever doesn't really add a whole lot, you know? I don't really see a whole lot of benefit from having like 8 pool and things like that in the game. I think it just extends the period where you could be getting cannon rushed and you're paranoid about it. You know, you might be getting proxy raxed and you don't know and you're worried about it. Like, it just increases that window a little bit longer. And it doesn't really do a whole lot else. The one thing that I think you could see as a positive, and I'm not sure if I am liking this or not yet, or if this even is really a thing, but I have been noticing it feels like because, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, because your tech is still available at the same time it always was, right? But now you're starting with less workers. So relatively, your tech is available earlier relative to your worker count than what it was previously, right? But you still want the same 3 base mineral saturation that you always wanted in StarCraft 2, because that's just how StarCraft 2 works, and how, your supply cap is 200, and that's just how, like, production and units are balanced. 3 base saturation is just really nice. You want to have that. Right? So what's interesting about this is, like, by allowing the tech to be a little bit earlier, like, you're kind of incentivizing tech and aggression a little bit more, and also related to the supply chain, you're making expanding a little bit less incentivized, right? And that's sort of making it feel a little bit scrappier and a little bit more like I'm hungry for money and nervous about my opponent attacking me. And a lot of that is just because the game is looser right now, but could also be because of the worker change. So
I think it's more because the
I think
game
this
is looser
could be
than
a
anything.
good thing from the worker change, but overall, I still think I probably don't really like the worker change.
Yeah, I kind of have to. I think it's more that the game is looser because there's no real build order sets, anything.
Yeah.
And the fact that the game is looser has kind of led to some weird moments of, oh, when do I expand? When do I do this? When do I take my gas? When do I throw down my factory or my cybercore? I mean, cybercore is going to be basically instantly, but when do I throw down my robo or my twilight or whatever? When do I throw down my roach warren? When do I do all this? Because, like, there's no set build orders. That's the one thing that this has done, is it's kind of just said, hey, you remember all this, like, the last 10 years worth of figuring the game out? None of it's relevant anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the note of the economy outside of the 8 workers, and to some
we'll get
extent,
there.
this is,
Hang on.
to some extent, this is. I want to touch on something that you said a moment ago. Like, I am finding that with the 8 workers start, I feel like I'm starving for minerals all the time until I get to 3 bases, and then because my minerals haven't started mining out my main base, I suddenly have an excess amount of minerals, so I don't need to expand anymore. So I just turtle.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've noticed the same. Relin, we haven't heard your thoughts on 8 workers, right?
It's true. So I have mixed feelings about the whole 8 worker start. So part of me feels vindicated. Like, I have to explain this a little bit. Back in 2015, when they were first talking about changing it from 6 to 8, 6 to 12 workers, I said to people publicly at the time, being like, hey, like, I don't think they should increase it by that much. They should go from like 6 to 8 to 6 to 9 or something, because, example, if you make it 12 workers, now let's just say there's a theoretical problem in the future, like something's really broken because of this. You can't change it, because if you go backwards in workers, it'll feel slower and people will dislike it. I'm right, so it makes me feel a little bit better in that regard. However, generally speaking, I don't really mind the slower start, and personally speaking, you can call it nostalgia from like 2015, like younger me, but like I kind of like the worker change, to be honest, to some degree. Like, it feels slower, but it was, you actually said like what I was gonna say, Ace. The tech feels way off compared to, so example, I remember Heart of the Swarm. People used to tech way harder back in the day because you started with 6 workers. But that led to people doing things like cheeses, and there's a lot more diversity in certain scenarios. Like, you could do like +1 roach timing. People used to do like proxy DTs with, like, because the pylon wasn't slow back, and like there's a lot of these like more gimmicky builds, but there was like such a diverse amount of them. But when you put it to 12 workers, the economy is so sped up compared to like how long it takes for the tech to finish, because they don't change the time of the techs. That like, it's similar like what you and I have complained about in the past. That example, like, it seems like anytime you get to a game where people know what they're doing, like, you can't cheese people because of like defender's advantage, that they'll just get up to 3 base saturation almost immediately. It's so fast, and like you get into these like late game scenarios so much quicker. Like, I feel like A, this is gonna like reduce that, but B, it's also gonna change up the game to some degree, where it will actually maybe bring in more players, can actually do certain things that you may not otherwise have. So I generally, like, believe it or not, like, I know like I am very much a minority opinion on this, but I do I think I kind of like the 8 workers compared to the 12 worker change. Not to say that it's like obviously better. I need to play on it more, but like at first glance, I feel like this could be like better in the future. I should say.
Yeah,
Counter.
I will say that like I was just kind of noticing that like there's things about the patch that I'm starting to enjoy and I'm liking, and I mentioned this earlier. That only started when the larva change happened. So I'm a little bit worried that maybe I just like it because my race got buffed.
Well,
but I am noticing that there's some things about the patch
enough.
that I'm starting to enjoy.
I was going to say counterpoint. Cheese still existed in the 12 worker start and was still frequent. Like the Clem versus Hero game that we had like a week or two ago, you'd be hard pressed to find a game that didn't start with a 1 base build from Hero or Clem on that particular series. But what I will say is the 12 worker start reduced the situations where you had the amount of build order wins.
yes.
Whereas what you're going to find now, and what happened a lot in Heart of the Swarm and what happened a lot in Wings of Liberty, is there would be times where you would just die because your build order didn't play well into your opponent.
I do agree with you. Like, so example, the slower worker count. So like, I'm not disagreeing that people didn't cheese with 12 workers. It's the fact that like your economy is so sped up compared to the previous one that like when you get the, like example, let's say someone's rushing carriers, they can afford it on I'm just making up numbers here. If you have 12 workers, they could rush the carriers on 3 Stargates. But with the 8 workers, they can only do it on 2 Stargates because the economies are not the same anymore.
Right, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
In this scenario, I agree with you that because the techs come out, they're tech coming out faster before people's certain economies will hit. But at the same time, like you're gonna see certain scenarios where there's potentially build order wins and losses, but like that happens also under 12. I can't say with confidence. I've had to play on this patch for a year before I actually came to a conclusion. Maybe you see it more, maybe you see it less. But it makes it where the units you make are like what I call more valuable. Like, because example, like if you rush the carriers on only
that is true.
No, I totally
so
yeah. That's what I was trying to explain earlier. Where like it feels like I'm clawing for money now. Where like everything, like, it's a struggle. Where I'm just like, oh my god, like when I can afford my hive and things like that, I'm just like, fuck yeah, let's go, hit the button.
Until you get to 3 bases and then you're fine.
Yeah.
But
I think we should talk about mineral gas, trying to speed things along here.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so how do you guys feel about the changes to the mineral gas counts on the bases? And to reiterate here, in case anybody is not clear, so there's a slightly more minerals and gas at every base, but the main change is that they're now no longer like half large and half small. They're like half a little bit larger and half a little bit smaller. So rather than it was what, like 5 minutes when you're like, or 8 minutes, sorry, when like half of them,
8 minutes, yeah,
half of them started to mine out, right? Now it's like a minute later, and then like a minute after that the other half mine out, roughly. Like I have to play with it a little bit more to get the timings, but it feels like it's a little bit later, and then it kind of hits you with like one right after the other. So it's like if your main starts to mine out and you don't have a base ready, it's like it actually hits you harder now, I feel like. But it comes at a much later time because your bases last a lot longer. So how do we feel about this?
So minor correction here. PTR had minerals where you had slightly more minerals. The live version does not. Live version has the same amount of minerals that you had on previous patch. They just distributed differently.
Right. So the PTR had an extra 400 minerals per base, and this one doesn't. I think you're right about that. Yeah, I do remember this.
The Vespian Geyser change does have more gas, though. And if I'm honest, I actually don't hate the idea of Vespian gas being a little more equivalent because it kind of means that after mining out your main base, you still have gas there. So there's kind of a reason to keep mining gas, even if it's not a whole lot. Like, you kind of spread yourself out just a little bit if you want that extra gas. Because your gas doesn't mine out quite as fast. Especially because the richness
I don't know,
in gas
especially for
mine
Zerg,
out
like
quite
we
as
get
fast either.
gas locked in the late game, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, true.
I can definitely feel. Well, the other thing that's interesting about this is like because I don't know how to or why this is happening. I think it's because of the next thing that we're about to talk about, but the supply cost being the supply you get from each base being decreased. I think that has incentivized more of a mineral-based economy than you know what I'm saying? Like the balance of your economy is a little bit more on minerals now than it was previously. So it feels like gas is scarcer now. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
I get the first part, not the second part of what you're trying to say, to be honest.
I'm not
Like,
sure.
because we're incentivized to get minerals a little bit more than we were previously because we need a little bit more, overlord or pylon or depot to be able to expand now, right?
Yeah.
So because of that, we're kind of encouraged to get a little bit more mineral-based economy than we were before, like the ratio of mineral to gas or like when you get your gas, right? So it's like a little bit more lean towards that. And because of that, it feels like we have less gas available. You know what I'm saying? Because you set up your economy with less gas, and then you're like, well, I have less gas to work with now. Because you had to set it up that way to get your third base out at the time that you wanted it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So like because of that, we have like less gas available. So them making it like longer mining on your gas per base kind of weirdly makes sense in a way, because like over time you're going to be stretching out mineral wise to get minerals from bases in the late game, right? But what did we do previously as Zergs, Relin? What did we do? We took our fourth base and immediately saturated the gas because that's what we fucking need it for. Right?
It depends. Yeah, it depends on the style that you're playing. If
Depends,
you're playing
right?
Bane,
But like, you would always get the gas, right?
Yeah,
like,
but if
it
you're
was a
going
question
lurker,
of how much minerals you would get, but you would always get the gas, right?
Yeah, if you're going something that isn't Ling Bane focused, like example Mutalists, Lurkers, you always got the gas because you always needed the gas.
Like
it's
any
almost
hive
guaranteed.
tech transition,
Yeah,
you would need those gas.
Anything other than a Ling or a Queen, you needed extra gas. So yeah, you're 100% right there.
So like what I'm trying to say there is it kind of weirdly makes sense for them to do that because it kind of fixes that imbalance where like gas feels a little bit too scarce and valuable in the late game. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can maybe see that. I mean,
this might be a Zerg biased perspective here because we are super hungry for gas in the late game. And I know it's not the same for Terran and Protoss.
I was going to say, for me personally...
I'd argue it's at least as bad for Protoss because Protoss, like all their units are extremely gas hungry.
Yeah, they need a lot of High Templar.
Like the worker change, I mean the mineral patch change, to me, like when I played macro games on the previous patch, I would always like swipe 8 workers from my main and then like move them to either my 4th or 5th base, depending on like how fast I was able to expand and like how much I had to defend. With this current patch, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. In all honesty, I haven't really played on it enough. I would assume the way I look at it is that it allows people to turtle maybe a little bit longer. So like the macro player in me is like, oh boy, this is awesome. And then my cheese account's crying because it allows people to turtle ever so slightly harder. So I'm not really sure how to really feel about this, to be honest. I would have to play on it for like a year or so before, like, for all I really notice, like, this doesn't really change the outcome of like really any games, like, for more or less. Like,
This might sound strange, but I've been finding that the length of time, because of the way the mineral distribution is now, the length of time you can turtle on 3 bases has actually increased quite substantially. It's a combination of the 8 worker start and the mineral redistribution.
Yeah.
And I've been finding that because you have less workers mining early on, because you have more minerals, the minerals spread
Oh,
differently
crap.
throughout your bases.
Sorry, sound might be messed up here. Hang on. I'm sorry. People might not be able to hear you. I gotta fix sound.
Oh, am I not coming through?
Let's see. Okay, they can hear you now.
Okay, so what I was going to say is, I've been finding that my main base starts to mine out, not does mine out, but starts to mine out almost around 10 minutes, where it used to be like 7 minutes, which is, quite substantial. And I've been finding that usually my mineral lines are empty in my main base kind of around that 12 to 13 minute mark, which is, again, like that's a really long time for you to be able to sit on one base.
Yeah.
And granted, part of that is some of the slower ramp up, but it's weird. I'm not happy about the increased ability to turtle.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. That's been one of my main concerns with this change, and this is one of the changes I'm not happy with.
Okay.
I just
look,
I don't think that this is the right way to do any of what we're trying to do here, because it's like we are all clearly annoyed with turtle games, and I don't know. I feel like this is the exact opposite of what we want.
There were already complaints about Terran turtling in TVP in the last patch. This just makes it easier to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about supply changes. How do we feel about these? And I'll start with saying I fucking hate them. I think that I don't know. It's weird because like this is another thing where as I play more on the live version, I'm like, am I weirdly enjoying the effect of this? Because I do like it when it's a little bit more back and forth and a little bit scrappier and a little bit less turtley straight to late game, and making it a little bit more expensive to expand definitely helps with that. And then like I was saying earlier, like the fact that your tech is available earlier relative to your worker count kind of combined with this change makes it so that expanding is a little bit less incentivized and aggression is a little bit more incentivized, and I kind of like that. But what I absolutely fucking hate about this is it ruins every build order. I could completely ignore the worker change and just be like, meh, I just got an extra 45 seconds to build workers in the early game. Who cares? It slows down the early game a little bit. It's a little bit annoying, but it's not the biggest deal. I could totally brush that off if it wasn't for the supply change on the hatchery, nexus, and command center. Those giving you less supply ruins every fucking build, and I hate it. Those are my thoughts.
Weirdly, this is
Yeah, kind of just took the words right out of my mouth, Ace, not gonna lie. Because
Glad I was
in the
able to
previous-
summarize.
Because on the previous patch, the hatchery would cost less, and you get more supply, and now it costs more, and you get less supply out of it. So I'm like even extra starved for minerals in the beginning of the game.
Yeah,
where I
for
have to try to
Zerg, it's
squeak
really
out-
bad right now.
I
Yeah,
have to
because we
try
pay
to squeak
300
it.
for the hatchery and 175 for the queen, and we get less supply. We get 4 supply from the hatchery. So, oh man,
Yeah.
we got to make so
Yeah,
many
so-
overlords in the early game.
Yeah, it's like I have to build an. It's like the equivalent under the 12 worker where I have to build an extra overlord before I make my queens, or
Yeah.
like right in between me making the queens. I'm like, what does this even have? Like, but like I don't have the extra benefit of having 12 workers from the start where I have an extra income either. Like it's like 3 things that just compounded it. It's more expensive for the hatchery. You get less supply, and you had to start with less workers. So like you're even strapped for even more. Like you have less cash in the beginning, so it's
Right.
even worse. It makes it feel like it's not even necessarily the build order change. It's just it makes it feel like I don't know, maybe like the other two races are different, but like as a Zerg player, it makes me feel like I'm starved for minerals. Like I cannot make enough overlords. You know, like I'm just
It's
so
very
starved.
awkward.
Like, yeah, it's very.
Yeah.
It just feels that doesn't feel intuitive. Like it feels even worse compared to like when I played Heart of the Swarm or Legacy of the Void compared to like any patch in Legacy of the Void or Heart of the Swarm. It feels just worse. I don't even know how else to really describe it.
Yeah, weirdly, this is kind of the one thing that I've always been like, it's a change, and that's just kind of all it is, because the reality is that if you're going to lower the work count, your starting minerals are always going to still be 50 to make the first worker, but everything after that is going to change. So when you need to start making workers, when you need to start making supply depots is going to change, because otherwise you start floating a lot more money. And then so the supply change was always going to happen, and I just kind of think the supply change is a direct consequence of the 8 worker start, and so it's kind of just been there. And I feel the difference in the need to start supply depot earlier and the amount of money you have for a barracks and all that. But I actually think that's less a consequence of the supply and more a consequence of the fact that we have now gone to the 8 worker start. And this is their way of just trying to force you to spend that money a little bit earlier rather than just immediately going, oh, I don't have to build an overlord. I don't have to build a supply depot. I'm just going to go hatch first. Command center first. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
2 supply, sure, but it's also, it's 2 supply extra that you don't have to build a supply depot or an overlord or a pylon for. So it's just kind of a like one is a consequence of the other. And so I'm kind of just like, it's there, and it was always going to happen whether we like you or not, because the 8 worker start happened.
I can guess I can kind of see that. I don't know. It is interesting to imagine like what would happen if they just did one of these rather than all 3 of these.
Yeah.
Weirdly, I'm starting to see the vision of the patch, though. Like, I have to say, despite me hating on it for so long, I weirdly am starting to see the vision of it. Because when I look at all of these changes, like, together, cohesively, I can see the logic for most of it. When I look at things like the Ghost, I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? Right? But I mean, as far as, like, the most, the biggest, you know, the highlight changes of the patch, you know, which is mostly economy stuff, I can kind of see how everything fits together here, which, you know, is at least better than what we had during the Balance Council. Because when that happened, you know, I'll say this, I loved the David Kim era despite everybody hating on David Kim, because I could clearly see his design philosophy, and I could see it not just like in the patches but in the game itself. And I could see how like the patch philosophy matched the game philosophy, and there was a consistency there. And it was like going for a certain style of design, right? A certain design philosophy. And it was consistent. Made sense, right? But when we had the Balance Council, I honestly felt like I was looking at a fucking like wish list, like a shopping list from pro players. Where I'm like,
Yep.
None of these changes like help the game or push it in the direction it needs to be. It's just things that the top 10 players want. And I fucking hated that. It was awful. Horrible
like,
for the game. So I will say that that is something that's good on this patch, where I can at least, the more I look at it, the more I can understand that it has a vision, even if I don't agree with all of the changes in it. You know?
That's
There's
true.
that.
I the only thing I will say to what you just said is that I like when David Kim was around, I used to hate him so much, and when the Balance Council started making all their changes like a year into it, I missed David Kim so much during that time. It's for the exact reason you said. At least Starcraft had a vision and was going somewhere. Like it had a direction. Like the other, like the Balance Council's like, we have 10 different things and they kind of contradict each other sometimes, but it was basically a wish list, so just here, take them. And I'm like, what?
Yeah. Right, I clearly recognize like what David Kim wanted at the start of Legacy of the Void, and like even though I didn't play Heart of the Swarm, I still like I had seen enough clips of it and talked to you guys enough to understand and like heard enough about people just complaining about the legacy of the void changes that I was understanding what had changed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was understanding you know, what the philosophy behind those changes was, and I was with David Kim on that stuff. I was like, I actually like this stuff. I'm the kind of psychopath who's a Zerg player who enjoys Widow Mines. Just to give you an idea. You know, there's a lot of people who fucking hate Widow Mines, you know, and they hate David Kim specifically because of the Widow Mine, and they think it's the perfect symbol of what's wrong with David Kim's philosophy. And I think that you guys are probably right if you don't like David Kim's philosophy. If you do like his design philosophy, then you see the Widow Mine as a crowning achievement. And I'm one of those people.
Yeah. I mean, I have a different opinion. The reason, like, I'm not gonna say like David Kim is perfect. I think I like his balance
perfect.
or his
yeah,
like, but like the biggest criticism of David Kim to me is not the Widow Mine, it is the Swarm Host. Because
sure.
you never played with the old Swarm Host, and oh my god, is that a terrible unit?
Yeah.
Just free units that constantly spawn without any input, and it just constantly does this for like a 3-hour game. I wonder why people just like David Kim in that scenario.
I love that idea of a
he
Swarm
talked about
Host.
that a lot in his interview.
I love the idea of that Swarm Host on paper, which is hilarious to me because, you know, if I like David Kim's philosophy, it's like, it would make sense that I would like the idea of doing that. But having seen the footage, bad idea. It did not pan out well.
Here's the thing, like, as far as infinite units, like free units go, free units themselves are not inherently a bad idea, as long as there are some caveats to them. The Broodlord is an example of free units done well. They are melee units, that's the first caveat, so you can't have infinitely stacking DPS, which you had with the old Swarm Host, the new Swarm Host Infested Terran. The other thing you can't have is you can't have a host unit that spawns the unit and then fucking leaves. Because
Without
then you
input,
never have any interaction where you can actually deal with the source of the free units. The Broodlord doesn't have that problem because the lifespan of the Broodlings forces it to stay in range and make sure that it is always in a sort of dangerous position that you can actually deal with it. The Infested Terran had this problem. The Swarm Host Locust has this problem, especially if you pair it with the Nidus Worm. It's launch and walk away, and you always have to deal with the problem, and you never get to deal with the source.
I don't know. Well, I think you could look at. I will say, I get what you're saying, but I think that mostly the problem that you're dealing with there is that the free units that it's spawning have too much health, you know? Or like really more accurately would be to say that it just takes too long to clear them, because then you run into the body blocking like swarming scenario, right?
No, I don't think it's a case of health at all. I think it's a case of you are always trading something for nothing.
I mean, that's just any long range unit though. You get what I'm saying? Like a siege tank does the same thing. When you're doing
that, yes, but the point I'm trying to make is the siege tank, yes, it can trade super efficiently, but the siege tank is always in a position where if you play right, you can always reach the unit. That is never the case for the Swarm Host. If the Swarm Host
launches the units that body block,
it just walks away.
Right?
But
because it doesn't siege.
Because it doesn't siege, yeah.
Well, I mean,
it doesn't
Tempest
have to stay there. It can.
I don't know. Like you can just look at the Tempest.
Yeah, but Tempest, you still have to stay there to keep launching and attacking. You can kite, sure, but there's a measure of skill expression there, and you're still you still have the potential to lose Tempests because of, you know, they got too close, or the Tempest is not a fast moving unit, so you can jump on top of them. the swarm host can jump into a Nidus Swarm, or like the infested Terran with the infestor, you could burrow and just walk away. Like it would.
How fast
That's
was
what
the swarm
happened
host
every single time.
back in the day? Like,
The
I don't
swarm
know.
host
We're getting in the
locked
weeds
down.
here. My point really is just that I don't think that the free unit itself is the problem, and I agree with David Kim in his interview. He said the same thing, where it's like it's just really fucking hard to balance, you know? Because if you look at like Warcraft 3, for example, you have the I forget what it's called, the Nerubian, the it's an undead hero, and he has an ability that lets him spawn locusts from a corpse of a fallen enemy. And you can do that, like, it has a cooldown, and they have a lifetime, and they kind of can snowball, but the rate that they can produce at is, like, gated, because it has, like, a super long cooldown, and you can only have a certain number of them at a certain time, if I remember right. If you have more, then it kills the old ones. Things like that.
Yeah,
Like,
but there are a
there's
lot of
ways you
caveats
can
to
balance
That's
it.
kind of the point.
Like, the
Because-
unit itself, like that hero is strong in Warcraft 3, but it's not broken, right? Like, my point is just that you can do it.
Sure. I mean, you could argue the same thing with the swarm host if, you know, let's say you've got a whole bunch of dead Protoss units. Let's make those units spawn locusts if the swarm host is around. Because at least at that point, the balancing factor is, hey, it's the amount of money my opponent has to keep, you know, dealing with the locust and dealing with if my units die, then spawning, then the deal breaker is if they don't lose units, then I can't spawn locusts.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough thing to really figure out. But I still think I agree with David Kim that I think the free unit concept can work. It's just incredibly hard to balance, and that's why it's such a challenge to implement. You know,
I think you do with free units. I think if you want to do free units, you have a leash range. If your progenitor moves out of
That's
leash
a
range, they
good way
die
to do it.
instantly.
Yeah. There's like a lot of different restrictions I didn't think about though. Yeah, with the Warcraft 3 hero, they kind of like gate it in other ways. Maybe that's really all it needs, is like a way to stop it from snowballing too far. I don't know. Getting too far off track. I think we can close things out now. Overall thoughts. Do we still not like the patch? And if we could pick and choose, what would we keep from the patch? I'll let you guys go first here.
So overall, I think any change is going to be a positive change. Generally speaking, you've heard me not like the ghost, not like the gate, like, or at least warp gate. I think they should change that, or at least like speculate on not doing a half measure on stuff like that. But I mean, while I think that the 8 worker compared to the 12 worker may make the game slower, maybe unfun, like if you just, example, keeping the game in the previous patch and just letting it chug along will just, to me, and surely kill the game.
Yeah.
So if
We definitely
I was
needed
forced
something to change. That's for sure.
So example, if anything, like, I may not enjoy, let's say, I'll just make up a number. I don't enjoy 50% of this patch or like 75% of it. It doesn't really matter. I think any change is better, but I think the 2 big ones that I walk away from would be, just me personally, I think nerfing, like maybe tweaking some of the numbers for the supply of like the hatchery, and maybe like, honestly, that's what I would do. I maybe would increase the hatchery and then decrease the larva spawn rate, and then revert all the ghost changes. And then I would personally, I know Miro would not agree with this, but I would personally experiment with removing warp gate, not doing a half measure there. But other than that, I think the overall changes of the patch are like pretty good, and I like them.
I'm wondering. I kind of want to press you more to be like, what exactly would you keep?
Oh,
I don't think we can do that. We don't. We've already been here for 2.5 hours.
Very true.
I was trying to keep it as short as possible. Everything that I didn't
Um,
mention, I want to keep. That's
Sure,
there.
sure.
If you want to do that, I will let you keep going. I'm going to give my thoughts very briefly. Is
Yeah,
in
yeah.
2 minutes.
no.
I'm going to head off.
No, no.
Yeah.
We're already about to end here, so just give your thoughts.
Yeah.
So
I was passing to you, Miro.
very simply, I think, like, I see the vision. I don't necessarily agree with the vision of going back to the 8-worker start, but particularly, I don't like the turtle, the changes that allow you to turtle more easily. I think that's a really dumb change, and I will never ever agree with that, because I think you should be more inclined to actively interact with your opponent, and turtling will always make the game more boring. Full stop. I think the ghost changes, I see the vision, I don't necessarily agree with them, but I also don't hate them. I don't hate them anywhere nearly as much as I did initially, because I've been able to play with them a lot more, and they're more balanced than I thought they would be. They are definitely stronger, but they're not as anywhere nearly as omniscient and overpowered as I thought they were actually going to be either. I think the Bedevac change is a direct buff, and I'm all for making the game easier to get into and lowering the skill floor, but I don't think easy should mean optimal. And right now, that change means optimal play is to just press the button and everything gets picked up immediately.
Yeah.
I think there should still be some skill expression, and I think that is not the way to go about it. Protoss, I'm gonna hold my tongue with this, because I kind of feel like the gateway changes are more a buff than a nerf, but I also am very content to wait and see. I can see how warp gate costing is definitely a direct nerf, but I also think the other changes completely offset that. Like, completely offset that. The fast warp in time is absolutely a 100% direct buff.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any getting around that. I do think the Storm, which we didn't touch on, I think that's been nerfed, and it does feel a bit
Oh yeah, that's right.
weird now. So it is what it is. But that's all.
I
That's
totally
all I
forgot
have to
about
say.
that. All right. Very quickly, my thoughts. Honestly, I'm starting to kind of like the patch, and the only things that are like really standing out to me that I hate are the supply change for Nexus, Hatchery, and Command Center, and the mineral gas changes at the bases, and what was the other one? All the ghost changes. Like, I think this is just a terrible idea to do these ghost changes. Other than that, honestly, like, I'm kind of warming up to a lot of the patch here. I think that it's kind of a step in the right direction, but it's really, really hard to tell right now. It definitely feels like Zerg is a little bit stronger, but plays a little bit differently and a little bit more low-tech swarmy, and I kind of like that. But I'm still not sure, just because it's so early, I'm not sure if that's actually the situation that we have. But that's what it feels like. And it also feels like with Protoss, it's really hard to say. It feels like, they could be weaker, could be stronger. It depends on how good the goober gates end up being. Once people start to really play with them and we start to like get optimized build orders built for using them. I think that's when we're really going to find out how good that change is. And as far as like the nerfs to like aggressive, Robo Twilight Prism styles, I mean, they haven't been doing those builds for like years, honestly. And I mean, you would still die to it occasionally on ladder or whatever, but I haven't seen that shit in tournaments in a really long time. So I mean, I'm not sure we're really losing a whole lot by nerfing those styles slightly. The 25-25 isn't even that much, and now the Warp Gate research is back on the Cybercore, so I don't really see a huge impact from this, like, nerfing Protoss, you know what I mean?
I think it'll take a while for that to come around.
Yeah,
For the
it's
actual
hard to
impact
say
of that.
for sure. Because
I
it's
think
a big
that-
change. I think the biggest change right now is Protosses don't know what they're doing because their builds are really weird. And Zerg being slightly buffed and Protoss being slightly off balance and not knowing what to do is making the game pretty enjoyable for me. So I'm enjoying that. So it's really hard to say because I'm a little bit biased right now.
Couldn't tell, Ace.
Yeah. Anyway, those are my thoughts, and I think we've probably talked this to death. We're at 2 hours and 25 minutes here. So I think we're ready to close out unless you guys have any closing thoughts.
Ace,
Nope.
we're getting longer. Please.
I know
Please
the
help.
shows they just keep getting longer.
All right.
All right. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the show, and please leave a comment if you feel like we left something out. If you got something we want to talk about in the future, or somebody we want us to interview or have as a guest, let us know in the comments below. All that fun stuff. And if you liked, give a like or subscribe. Have a good one, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show.